Jared Lawrence, Canberra Raiders player number 227. Welcome, mate. How are you?
Yeah, great, Paul, mate. Thanks for having me.
Oh, pleasure, mate. As we were just chatting off air, I try and get a wealth of different people on here to chat about different aspects of health and fitness, and obviously, professional rugby league was one of them. Having been a former Canberra Raider player and me being a closet diehard fan, it was definitely one to get on and chat about. So if I get off topic and start talking about the heydays of the Raiders, you might have to wind me back. But obviously, the point of
you're right. We're sitting at 14th, 15th on the ladder. Still proud Raiders supporters.
It is.
It's to watch.
It's tough to watch, I must admit. My kids keep rubbing it into me all the time, but I've been supporting them since I was 6 years old, and I've seen more bad times than good through that period. Yeah. So it's not something I'm unfamiliar with, I guess, as a fan. But hopefully they can dig themselves out.
Yeah, mate, that's exactly right. It's it's actually the 40th year, isn't it? The 40th.
It is.
Reunion. Yeah. So actually, they're having their catch up this week. I can't make it, unfortunately, but there's a big weekend planned down there. So hopefully they can put on a win.
Yeah, I reckon so. There might be some motivating factors behind that to sort of spur them on. They've got a few changes. Obviously, Jack Whiten's out as well. They lost Josh Hodgson within 5 minutes of game one, and then Jamal Fogarty, their big off-season signing, their halfback, didn't make a game, so they've been up against it. But
that's 3/4 of the spine gone, isn't it?
It is.
And then obviously with Chance not being in great form, we've had Rapana at fullback, so that's a major element of your team, isn't it? Your structure having those three players. So
it is.
Not putting up excuses, but hopefully we can turn it around.
Oh, I think so. And Jared Croker's back this week, so their spiritual leader. I think he'll bring a lot to the side.
Oh yeah.
That experience and that.
Roaring.
Yeah. So I'm quietly confident, but we'll wait and see. It's on tonight, actually. It's the first game tonight, isn't it? So it'll be good.
Yeah. I'll settle down with a couple of beers and have a look.
Absolutely. So obviously the reason I wanted to get you on, mate, was to talk about your career as a rugby league player. Now you obviously played a handful of first grade games, bunch of reserve grades, won a comp in the reserve grades, but also wanted to talk about the style of training that you guys did back then. Was there any sports science involved? Obviously, they didn't have GPS or anything like that, but preseason in particular, because I listen to a lot of rugby league podcasts with a lot of ex-professionals, and they all talk about how dreaded the preseason was. So I'd love to sort of get your take on what was involved there and why it was so horrific. And then obviously the week to week too. So from game to game, if you got a 5-6 day turnaround, what you did in terms of weight training, recovery, team training, captain's run, all those sorts of things. So, but you want to just give us a quick oversight on your career when you debuted, how you got to the Raiders, because obviously from up here down there, obviously there must have been some connections and links.
Yeah, for sure. So, like I just mentioned off here, I'll just make it clear that I certainly wasn't a household name, and I really appreciate you asking me to come on your show. I've looked back at some of your content, and you've had some pretty cool people on your show. So I really feel privileged to be here and to chat about it. So look, grew up in New Zealand, played rugby league as a kid, and made the venture to the UK actually when I was 21. So went through all the junior grades playing football, and we actually used to get beaten every week. I was on a junior team that just got flogged every week, and it wasn't until the senior ranks where I actually started winning some football games. So at 21, I had an opportunity to go to the UK and play in the Northern Forward competition, which was like one under the Super League.
Okay.
Long story short, didn't sort of work out for me because back then you had to have a certain visa and so forth. So I tried every avenue I could to try and make it work, but it just sort of didn't work out for me. Had some friends playing up in the Mackay comp for the Whit Sundays of all places. So made my way to the Whit Sundays via the UK, which was not bad weather-wise. And I played for Mackay, the Whit Sundays in the Mackay comp. So that was back in 99. 99, 2000 season. So that was quite some time ago. And look, how it all sort of come about, the coach at the time, Eddie Muller, quite a good friend with Mel Meninga, said, look, I've got a couple of guys on the side that you might want to have a look at. At that stage, I was playing in the halves. And I sort of, through my career, I never really cemented a spot, if you like. I was more of a utility. So I could play in the halves, I could play in the back row. I actually ended up debuting in the second row, funnily enough. But Mal Meninga was up that way, sort of like what he saw, and I was invited to a trial down at Ipswich in the pre-season of 2000, and must have impressed him a little bit. So then got invited down to Canberra. So I suppose going back to the question, my career was, I was a pretty sound footballer as a junior, just sort of loved rugby league. Brought up in New Zealand, obviously, as a pretty staunch rugby union country. So,
of course, yeah.
Mum and Dad, Dad was very much a leaguey. He sort of, I played union for school, and I think there was 1 year under 15s we didn't actually have a side in the league, so I played rugby union, and even then it was a struggle for Dad to come and watch because he just loved his league. But anyway, I'd done reasonably well at that as well, and it was just a matter of doing my best, and getting to Canberra was just a dream come true. I used to follow the Raiders, actually, funnily enough, back in when I was younger, and followed Mal Meninga and Laurie Daly and the like. So to actually get down there and rub shoulders with, at the time, Ruben Wiki, the Max, the Super Max. So
the Super Max.
Yeah. So it was awesome. It was an absolutely dream come true for me. So that was sort of my career in a nutshell. I wasn't probably the flashiest player. Just my game was just around hard work. Yep. And just sort of being that player that other players wanted to play with, just done the hard yards, and
unreal. So talk me through the Ipswich trial and then the approach from the Raiders. So obviously contracts and stuff are not what they are not what they are today back then. So did they offer you a train and trial, or did they just say come down for 12 months, or how did that work?
Yeah, so there was no sort of talks about money, and at that point in time, obviously it wasn't something I was going to bring up. I mean, it was an opportunity. I went down to, it was actually played at Ipswich Grammar. There was about, 100 players, and it's like, well, how the hell am I going to stand out here? And I went down as a halfback. And anyway, they were a bit short on hookers, and the coach for the trial says, is there any hookers around? And no one put their hand up. I thought, well, I'm going to put my hand up. So I ended up having a blinder, and they picked 2 guys out of the 100 to go down to Canberra to have a look around. It was me and Mick Jack, Indigenous boy from Ipswich, that was selected. And actually that night, it was that transition of when Mal Meninga was still coaching, but they brought in Matty Elliott.
Yeah, I remember that. Yep.
So, back in 2001. And so that night, actually, Mel took myself, Mick Jack, obviously Matty Elliott, Gary Belcher was there, the reserve grade coach at the time. I forget his name, but we ended up going into the valley and having dinner and so forth. And even then, obviously, and obviously now, when anyone sees Mal Meninga, he's such a big name and such an awe about him. And here I was just having dinner with Mal Meninga. It was really surreal. So, but even then, I thought, look, I've got an opportunity to go down to Canberra, and they'd done a bit of testing. So we went through the 20-40 metre sprint, a bit of agility and a strength test, and basically a bit of a look around the fixtures down there, and then went back to Brisbane, because I had relocated from Mackay to Brisbane, because I thought I was going to be playing for Ipswich, because that was the whole idea, was go to Ipswich, play for the feeder club, and then if I impressed them, they might bring me down to Canberra, with no expectations whatsoever. I was just happy to be going from Mackay into the Ipswich team, which was in the Queensland Cup at the time. So anyway, long story short, Mal Meninga called me up one evening. At the time, I was just working as a storeman in Brisbane there at a warehouse. Had a phone call saying, hey, look, we'd really like to invite you down to play in our reserve grade competition, with the potential to obviously play first grade if you do well. Obviously we need to see whether you can adapt to our way of, you're moving down from Brisbane. At that stage, I think I was about 22. So I'd already been out of home for a few years. And I guess that's something that they look out for in a young player, is that how they're going to go moving, from maybe a country town or even from New Zealand across, to sort of fit in with the lifestyle. Because it's not like you're going to get there and, you're signing on for, huge money, and you're going to have, they're going to give you a car, they're going to give you a job and all that sort of stuff. It's an opportunity. That's basically what it is. And it's really, and that I guess is something that they put out as a test, I believe, so that, you know, how mentally strong is this kid? You know, is he going to be able to sustain the training? Is he going to be able to, you know, because I wasn't going down there and signing a $100,000 deal. I wasn't a Todd Carney. I wasn't a Terry Campese. So, yeah, and I went down there, and they ended up putting us into a place called Waratah House, which is just like a dorm, I guess, sort of a bit like a backpackers. Okay, so we get put in there, get our own room, get our food paid for, and basically get told what time to turn up to training on Monday morning, and just take it from there. So
yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Talk me through. You mentioned the strength test. I'm curious to know what, in regards to obviously seeing where your strength lied. What was involved in that? Was it simple as a dead, a bench, and a squat, or what was?
Yeah, it was a squat, a bench press, and look, Paul, I can't even recall the weights, but it wasn't something that was. I think I had to do my max 3 reps.
Okay.
Bench press, squats. I think was very similar. It was actually a leg press, mate, not squats, and it was a power clean. So it was a power clean, which I don't really see a lot these days.
No.
Power clean. The power clean, the bench press, and the leg press.
Yeah, right.
And that's all it was basically. So yeah, and Alex Corvo was the strength and conditioning coach. So he just stood there with his notepad and took some notes, and there you go. So even in the sprint, you know, like it was just off the stopwatch, and I sort of got the nod at the end. I sort of looked at Mel and sort of said, "Look, how did I go?" He goes, "Yeah, no, you went all right." And then I got invited back. So I must have been doing something right. I certainly wouldn't have been breaking any records, that's for sure. But I guess they might have just saw the fact that I put in the effort, and, you know, even at that point, even moving down there and being given the opportunity, you're not guaranteed anything. You know, you've still got to put the work in. And I saw many players get to that point and still, you know, either mess up their opportunity by doing something off the field, or just not towing the line at training, or not being able to keep up with what was expected of them, and then, you know, they'd just be, I guess, told quietly that, you know, they're no longer needed. So
yeah, wow.
It was a matter of really just rolling up your sleeves and you know, doing what was required.
Yep. So when you got to that point, and you obviously were invited to go down there, were you getting paid in any way at that stage?
Yeah, it was a $5,000 sign-on. So $5,000 sign-on, which you got up front, and then when the season started, I was playing reserve grade, so you get $250 a week a win, and $150 a loss. So I was quite lucky, because that first season all the seasons I played there, we always made the final. So we would win more games than we lost. So, but it's still, at that stage, I didn't have a family. So it was still probably not enough for me to live on. Well, it was enough for me to live on, but for me, early on, I knew, even at that point, I was never going to be earning the 250, 300, 400 grand a year. You know, I had pretty good self-awareness. Like, I was a decent football player, so I started looking for work, and I managed to pick up a job through one of our sponsors. So I not only had the income through the rugby league, which, you know, might have been picking up on a good week, you know, 250 plus, if you divide the $5 grand by, you know, 52 weeks, whatever that might be, it's still not a huge amount of money, even back then. In 2001. I was getting free board, you know, getting the food paid for. So I went out and put the feelers out there, and Mel Meninga ended up getting me an interview with one of the sponsors, and I ended up getting a job, which was an amazing job as well. So that was flexible. I was able to train, and obviously, you know, if we were playing away that weekend and we needed to catch a bus on a Friday morning, I'd always been given the green light to go early. So that was great. It was, you know, and then it gave me a solid income. Stresses of financial stresses. And I was able to concentrate on the football, and managed to play my debut that season. That first season was round, I think, 17 against Newcastle later in the year. Bit of a nightmare game for the team, because we ended up getting flogged by Newcastle by about 50. But I think I was the only player to come off the field with a smile on my face, because I think it was that record Joey John scored 24 points in one game. yeah. So, but look, I was at the club that I grew up loving.
Yep.
I was being coached by a player that I watched on television, and the day I ran out for the Raiders, I got handed my jersey by Laurie Daly, who was another.
Oh wow. Talk us through your debut and how you found out. Like, did Mal call you and say, right, you're going to be playing this week?
No, it was quite rushed, to be honest. I think I was 19th man, and it was up in Newcastle. Shocking wet day. It was raining and gloomy. I was sort of 19th man. I roomed with Greg Wolfgram. He was playing in the centres. And even up to an hour before the game, I didn't realise I was playing. Someone was injured. Someone went up there with an injury. Might have been Mark McClendon or McFadden. I think it was McFadden.
Oh, right.
And he sort of pulled out last minute. So I got the nod when we got to the ground. So it wasn't like a big occasion. I mean, it was a big occasion for me, but there was no really hoo-ha about it. Like these days, they get the family in and they give out the jersey and all that sort of stuff. And I guess, if I was, named in the side that week, it would have been a little bit different.
Sure.
So yeah, it was, it's an unreal experience, but there wasn't too much of a hoo-ha about it. It wasn't until my next game where I actually got named in the side where I got my jersey presented to me by Laurie.
Yep.
Look, I think what they do now are, even the playing numbers, like I'm number 227, I didn't actually realise my number until after I'd finished playing, because it wasn't something that was sort of presented through. I think that's a fairly new thing.
It is, yeah.
So everyone I played, I had no idea what number I was.
Yeah, wow. I'm probably going to go on a tangent here, but talk us through that your debut game, because you run out on the field, you've got Andrew Johns on the other side, Matthew Johns. I'm assuming Paul Harrigan was playing then as well.
No, it wasn't Paul Harrigan. So this is sort of getting back to position wise. So I went from Mackay as a halfback. I had a massive off season, and I put on a bit of size, I guess. And I went down there at 80 kilos. So my playing weight was 88.
Right.
And I actually started in the second row.
You're right.
With Ruben Wiki. So when I went on, I remember I went on probably 20 minutes into the first half, and I replaced, I think it was Sean Rutchton in the second row. And then I ended up going in the centres. And I never played centre in my life. And I was marking Matt Gidley. Bear in mind, this Newcastle team went on to win the competition in 2001. They beat Parramatta.
Yep.
And Nathan Highmarsh. That was the one he almost got.
Yep.
But yeah, Newcastle won the comp that year. So we're up against Robbie Davis at fullback, Joey Johns at halfback. We had Gidley in the centres. Matt Parsons.
I remember Matt Parsons.
Matt Parsons is about 7 foot tall. He's the first guy that I tackled actually in that game. And they had the guy Jackson in the back row, just an absolute big, tall timber of cement. They were just rugged. But man, I was on adrenaline. I was just, if I go back and look at the video, I don't think I missed a tackle. I was just everywhere.
Yeah, good.
It was just unfortunate. When I went on, we were under the pump already, so I was sort of on the back foot. Didn't get many attacking opportunities, but just defending the backside off. And Darren Albert was the winger at the time.
Yeah, I remember Darren. Scored the try in the grand final. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but look, great experience. And yeah, it was great they called it Marathon Stadium back then. So packed house. I mean, Newcastle, win, lose or draw, they're supporters that always turn up for their team.
Yep.
So it was a real good, big occasion, big crowd. And yeah, it was
unreal.
Great.
That's unreal. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of training, because this is what I'm really curious about. I obviously want to get into pre-season as well, but just the week-to-week training, what was involved? How much detail did they go into? Did they monitor how you performed in the game in terms of, running meters or tackles you made or anything like that, and then gave you more recovery because of that? Or was it just simply recover, train, get ready for the next game?
Yeah, well, training-wise, we're looking at early 2000s. So back then, pretty much your weights program, your running program was the same if you're a fullback or a front rower. There was no real positional programs what there are now. So I think sort of towards the end of my time at Canberra, it sort of started to come in. So, running wise, if we talk about pre-season, we were sort of heavily, I would say, outweighed by endurance training than what we were weight training. Weight training was, we were given a gym program that would do sort of 3 days a week. I'm talking pre-season here.
Yep.
And the running was just 1.5k runs, 3k runs, 5k runs. Like we used to do 10k loops around Bruce Ridge as part of the pre-season. So, like it was just basically just run. There wasn't a hell of a lot of science behind it, I guess. It was just getting them fit.
Yep.
Get them and make sure they've got plenty of endurance under their belt. And then the strength side of things would be sort of secondary, from what I remember anyway. Getting into the once we started playing, again, we trained at the Deakin Health Spa back then, which was at the time Raiders didn't actually have their own facility. They did just before I left, but we'd train there. We'd meet there in the morning. We'd do forwards and backs. I've actually got an old program here that I dug out.
I saw that.
The Raiders 2000 training program, Christmas. So I went back through and had a look at that, and we'd have bench press, squats, hack squats, deadlifts, power cleans. They were saying mainly the main lifts, and it was just basically 8 to 10 reps. There was no real
simple
measurements. Yeah, very simple. So, and a lot of the time, Paul, we were sort of left to our own accord. Like Alex Corvo, I mean, he's still around now, and obviously he was quite new at that position back then as S&C coach. But it was really one size fits all in regards to the training regime. So there wasn't a lot of science behind it at all. You'd have, everyone sort of knew who the strongest was in the gym. You'd always get that one guy that could bench, 160 kilos, or who could squat more than the other. But other than that, most of the guys just sort of stuck to what they were given. And 2003, we had Carl Jennings come across from the UK. So Carl Jennings is a Pommy trainer that actually had a really big emphasis on power, and he loved the rowing machine. So once Alex moved on down to the Storm, Carl come on board and was huge on the rower. So we would be doing the 300 meters under a minute times 10.
Yeah, wow.
We'd get a 1500 meter row, and then what he'd do, he'd get us under fatigue and then get us out in the paddock, start doing 400s. And you know what it's like when you're coming off a rowing machine or off a bike, and then you're out on,
you're just blowing diesel and you can't recover. Yeah.
So while I was there, we had Alex Corvo for the first year. Then we had Carl Jennings, who had come from the UK Super League and was all about getting big and strong, and just packed on a lot of size. We were right into the creatine, HMB, the protein shake. So he was all about putting on a lot of size. But I think it might have been the 2003 season or 2002 when he came on board. I think it wasn't really something that was a good idea at the time, because what was happening is, we were getting big and strong, but the game also needed that aspect of being able to be fast and so forth. So he put a lot of emphasis on being big. And I think if you look back in history, it sort of, the first grade side didn't win too many games early on. So it was, just, his point of view, and taking nothing away from Carl, but I guess what it's saying is the UK game was a bit different than the Aussie game at that stage.
Yep. Yeah, wow. Okay. So in terms of, based on what you just said, there wasn't any sort of consensus around how much training was too much leading into a game week to week, or it was just
not really,
get as fit as you can.
Yeah, unless someone had an injury that, a bit of a niggle, I guess, and the physio or the doc had sort of said, take it easy this week, then it would become more of an honesty system, so that if you weren't feeling that great, you would there was no GPS, so I know now they've got the GPS on their jerseys.
Yeah.
That sort of track, the players' performance and their heart rate and so forth. So
yep.
At that point in time, there was none of that. So
no, okay.
No.
Could they identify if you're doing too much? Like, would they look at you on Thursday or Friday and say, oh, geez, they're running a bit flat today, or they're looking a bit burnt out or whatever? Like, could they do that and then try and pull you back a bit on the training, or was it simply a case, no, just get it done?
Yeah, just pretty much get it done. I mean, I guess if there was a little bit of fatigue, if there was a short turnaround, I guess, and maybe because being in Canberra, we'd travel up to, and back then when I was playing reserve grade, we'd follow first grade most of the time. Even we'd go to North Queensland, which was great. I don't believe they do that now. They sort of separated into the Queensland and New South Wales Cup, and you don't sort of get that, that sort of the reserve graders sort of, I guess, wouldn't feel part of that whole group. They sort of come in and out if they're needed. Whereas back then it was great. We'd go up to North Queensland. We'd travel with the team. The only places we wouldn't go as a reserve grade side was to New Zealand and Melbourne. So yeah, I guess I take that into account, the travel that we had to do, because all the Sydney games, if you're in first grade, you'd fly to Sydney. If you're in reserve grade, you'd take a bus. So they would sort of look at that, I guess, and sort of take that into consideration. But majority of the time, Paul, was just mainly just get it done. Get it done. I suppose the philosophy is there's a lot more science behind it now. There's a lot more studies around player burnout, and that's I suppose where the game has changed too. I mean, if you look at the game, the rules have changed, no doubt. When I played, it was probably a little bit slower, I guess, but I probably think it was a little bit tougher because there was no, it wasn't as much emphasis around the head highs. You could throw a punch. Not that I was any fighter at all, but I believe that the game was obviously a little bit slower. But the shoulder charge was still in. I know, there's a lot of controversy around the rule changes, and everyone's got their opinion, and it all sort of stems back to grassroots, where players, where kids, they want more kids to play the game. So that's probably why they're changing a few of the rules, and they're looking at after the retention. But getting back to the question, look, not that I can recall anyway that there would be any, basically anything, any
consideration around that. Yeah. Did you ever get into a stoush on the field? Were you ever involved in anything?
No, mate, not really. No, look, I just sort of take my aggression out on the next tackle. So I was fairly placid sort of a guy, but I suppose it took a lot to sort of get me over the line. But I didn't really throw any punches. But I favoured myself as a fairly decent defender, so I just usually take it out on the next tackle. There's plenty of guys that like to throw the punches and stuff. And at the end of the day, that's them. There's a couple where Darren Porter actually played reserve grade, a fair bit of reserve grade with him, and he'd love to throw it through a few punches. But yeah, certainly been knocked out of the game now, isn't it? There's a lot of pushing and shoving and a little bit of slapping now.
That's it, yeah. Can't get away with even, I'm sure you heard a few things on the field as well in terms of, jabs and banter and just trying to get under each other's skin and stuff like that. And you can't, that's almost outlawed as well now.
Yeah. No, it's but there was, if I look back at some of the players that I played with, then you'd remember Josh Miller. Josh Miller that played at the Canberra Raiders. He was just one of those tough individuals.
His runs, he'd be like a missile, just straight at the line every time. Yeah,
amazing leg drive, Joshy. Like he had quadzillas on him, and just quite low to the ground, and just had that real good leg drive. Alan Tongue, he was another guy that just let his shoulders do the talking. I mean, he was probably around about my size, not a great lot about the size of Tungy, but.
Was he captain when you were playing?
No, he sort of come on. Actually, when I was there, Tungy was, I think he played first grade in 2000 as like a 21-year-old. So he sort of featured quite early. He played Australian schoolboys, and then when I was there, he was sort of because you had Simon Wolford at hooker, and Tungy was a bit like myself. He had sort of Tungy would go from back row to 13, then to hooker. And sort of back then, sort of probably didn't have the best pass on him, but he was one of those guys that just worked on his game. he would be there an hour before and an hour after, and that's what got Tangi to captain the club, was that it was his hard work.
Yeah, right.
Not the flashiest of players, but yeah, put a lot of work in behind the scenes. So yeah, when I was there, he was sort of in and out of reserve grade, mainly first grade. And it wasn't until probably when he hit sort of 24, 25 is when he sort of his career took off, and he led the club for quite a few years.
Yeah, right. Talk us through preseason. So was there anything, like, you hear these stories about sandhills and military style boot camps and going away on camps and all this stuff to really, well, back then, toughen you guys up for what was to be a long season. What did you experience anything to that caliber, and was there any ones that stand out?
So when I got there, I'd sort of train full time for that period, which was the preseason, and they used to have this run, which was out the back of Bruce Stadium, which is now Canberra Stadium, which is Bruce Ridge. And looking back on it, like, it was all uneven surface. It was really poor terrain. It was a bit like running out the back of Glasshouse Mountains. Like, there was potential for ankles to be rolled, so it was a 10K loop. So we would do that in the morning, and then sometimes in the afternoon, depending on performance, we go back and do it in the afternoon. So that was just a grind out. We had guys like, I remember Adele Manuel, big winger that came across from the Warriors.
Yep.
He was basically, Mal actually ended up running with him at the back. Like, he just wasn't, his body wasn't designed to run 10Ks,
Yep.
But it was just a matter of that was the job. You just got to get it done. We had a few things like the tough test and so forth, which was done on the paddock, and it was just a matter of some, stations where it would be, tackle stations, some sprints, up and backs and so forth. But it was just a matter of gritty, tough, like when we'd have physical defensive sessions, it's just a matter of sort of aiming up against guys like Ruben Wiki, Luke DeVico. Like it was pretty brutal. But yeah, pre-season was, I'd come home with shin splints, blisters, but you couldn't show any sign of weakness, because as soon as you did that, then, like, not that anyone would just come out blatantly and call you a soft cock or anything like that, but you just wanted to do that for your own pride. You didn't want to show any weakness. It was competitive for position, so you didn't want to, show the coach that you were hurt in any way. But look, it was humane. It wasn't inhumane. It was training that. I coach now, and I can honestly say that our boys get off pretty lightly compared to what we used to go through.
Yeah, right.
In the weekend, we did Point Cartwright, because we didn't have a game. So all 3 grades at Kiwana went up to Point Cartwright, and it was, Point Cartwright. We did 20 laps up and back, and in the group we had to have tyres. We had a tyre and a medicine ball and a 15-kilo plate, so we sort of shared the load up and back. I actually did that last week, and I don't run at all. I've had a hip replacement, so I'm mindful of that, but often I like just to get in amongst it with the boys and just sort of have a go. And if it wasn't for the last 15 metres, I come down and twisted my knee. I think I might have torn a little bit of a meniscus, but other than that, I kept up reasonably well, I'm not trying to float my boat at all, but I just think that the players of today, especially, in this local league that I'm coaching in, maybe if they were put to the test, they'd get through it, but it was very, very grueling, back then. And it was just you just did it, When you talk to guys like Adam Mogg, I know Moggy, Chris Flannery around town, like if you were to ask those guys the same questions, and obviously they were regular first graders, but back then reserve grade would do the same training. They would tell you how the training has changed a hell of a lot now. It's really scaled down, and I think because they've obviously realised that there is a lot of player burnout. It has got, I guess, even though I said before it was more physical back then, I believe players in stature have gotten bigger. They've gotten taller. They've gotten bigger. So maybe the impacts are more intense now.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
When did preseason start back then? Was it, because I know it's like early November now?
Yeah, so it was depending on how well you went the season beforehand, and it would sort of start October, end of October, start of November.
Okay.
So you'd have that November, December. So you'd have a good 8 weeks pre-season before Christmas.
Yep.
You'd break up on the 21st of December or what it might be, and then you'd be back on the 3rd or 4th of January. So it was just that little bit of a break. Players would go back home. In my case, I'd fly back to New Zealand, have some Christmas there. You'd be given one of these programs, so you had to make sure that you did that at home.
Okay.
And then when you got back, there was always the scare factor of, hey, you're going to be tested, you're going to be this, you're going to be that.
Yeah, right.
Being a fringe player, I'd never got a tap on the shoulder and said, hey, Jared, you've got to come and do this test. Maybe if you're a Ruben Wiki, Clinton Shavosky, Luke DeBico, maybe, you might have had a bit of a tap on the shoulder if maybe they thought you come back a little bit unconditioned. Because they had the Fat Club back then. They probably wouldn't be allowed to call it the Fat Club now. It'd be too politically incorrect. So, if your skin folds were over and beyond what was I suppose deemed as satisfactory for your position, you would then be in the fat club. So
they took skin fold. So that was one metric they used to measure your body composition. Yeah.
That sort of come back to me. Yeah. So skin folds, they sort of determined whether or not that was one of the measures, I guess, of maybe how fit you were. But in saying that, we had guys with quite big skin folds that were some of the fittest. So I don't know whether that was a real good gauge on being able to tell if someone was ready to go or not.
Yeah, right.
We always had players that were a lot better trainers than they were players, and I probably believe I was one of those guys. I absolutely loved to train. I actually listened to one of your podcasts, Paul, recently about treating training as not a chore. And treating training is more of just something that you enjoy, and I've always enjoyed it. It's never been a chore for me to wake up at 4:35 in the morning and get out into the gym here and have a go. And I think back when I played, there were some players that were able to sort of be a mediocre trainer, I guess, but then just be able to turn it on the field. That's something that the coach would have to recognise. It's the coach's job to recognise the strengths and the weaknesses and what makes players tick. And there was some players there that they didn't put the effort in. A bit like Adele Manuel, like he hated the long distance running. He would just do the bare minimum, but then on the field he'd turn into a beast. So. And I don't know if you follow Adele, but he actually went on to be one of Australia's strongest men for YouTube.
Oh, did he really? Yeah, wow.
Yeah. He's a powerlifter now. I think he's retired now. But yeah, go on to YouTube and look up. I've seen a couple of links. Unreal. He's become one of Australia's strongest men. So yeah, I mean, different training, methods suited different players, and I think that's why now the game has come a long way in regards to that, where you've got certain programs for certain positions. Is there a need for a front rower to go out and run 10 Ks? Probably not.
No, good point.
Is there a need for a front rower again to be running 100-meter sprints? Which we used to do a lot of, and 400s. They're probably more suited to the 20-meter sprint. That's unless you want to make a break, it's probably the most they're going to run in a game.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, was there any emphasis on nutrition, like to ensure that obviously you guys didn't put on too much weight, or you had to stay within a ballpark of weight gain and stuff like that?
Yeah. We used to have that's something that was definitely, we'd have people coming in, nutritionists and so forth, talking about diets and that sort of thing. So yeah, it was definitely a focus. Then we at the time, I think Musashi were the provider of supplements, and then BSC. So there would always be protein shakes, meal replacements, the creatine and so forth, the recovery drinks. And even back then, 20 years ago, that was still around. Yeah. And that we'd sort of stick to that. But then we'd always on a Thursday night enjoy going down to one of the RSLs for a snitty and on the way home on the bus rides, we stop and get burgers. So, I mean, it was nothing for me anyway to lose 4 or 5 kilos in a game, 2 or 3 kilos, probably 5 is a bit extreme. But just the intensity of the games as well, especially in the heat up in Sydney, that September, October, you'd lose a lot of fluids. So,
absolutely.
Having a big snitty roll and a burger after a game wasn't going to hurt you.
Yeah, okay. Was there anything in relation to, because you see the players these days, they're sucking on those super duper electrolyte things, and obviously they got Gatorade at hand and all that sort of stuff. Was there anything before the game that they tried to give you in terms of providing, hydration specific besides water? Anything you ate before the game for energy? Was there any focus on that?
Not really, not that I can recall. I do remember one of the suppliers bringing in some of those gels. I think it was like a gel.
Oh, yeah.
That provided some form of energy. But look, at the end of the day, we were just told to hydrate with water and get out there and do the job. There wasn't a lot of that around, Like, I know now, like you see players at half time, sucking on those things, and what's changed, I guess, too, is back then we had a coach, assistant coach, we had a strapper, and a manager.
Right.
Whereas now you've got your coach, your assistant coach, your forwards coach, your backs coach, your defence coach, your offence coach. You've got 3 or 4 strappers, physio, you name it.
Doctor.
Doctor. I mean, there's always a doctor on site, but there seems to be a hell of a lot more people around as a support network, I guess, for the players.
Yeah, 100%.
Let's face it, it's a contact sport. They put on a good show for us. Couch post potatoes on a Friday night, sitting down to watch it. Absolutely love it. Even now, sitting down and watching, whether it's the Raiders or whoever, I just love it. Yep. And the Origin's coming up. Like, that's
absolutely.
Times of the year.
Oh, so good. Yeah, it's exciting. I know. Playing in Canberra, did you ever, because I know there was that famous game, and I don't think it was your time against the Tigers where it actually snowed. Yeah. Did you experience any like ridiculously cold nights when you had to play?
Yeah. So coming from New Zealand, I suppose I was fairly accustomed to cold weather. So it wasn't something that was, I actually felt at home when it was cold. It felt like I was back home. But I actually remember that game, West Tigers Canberra, when Leslie Vonacolo slid down that left-hand side through the snow.
Yeah, it was unreal.
That was the year I was in Mackay. So I was sitting in the Brothers League Club in Mackay, whenever that was. And it was like 30 degrees in Mackay. It was like a really hot day. And here we are watching this game of football unfold in front of us, and it's snowing in Canberra.
Yeah.
It just goes to show you the massive size of this country.
Oh, because I think they had to get heat packs out at half time to keep the guys from freezing over. It was just, they had never been seen before.
Yeah, no, there was one game that sticks in my mind. It was against Newcastle, and I played reserve grade. Remember Dane Tilts?
Yes, big tall timber.
Yeah, big tall. So Dane ended up coming to Canberra, but it was when Dane was playing for Newcastle in reserve grade. We actually won the game 4-0. It was just a bash and barge up the middle. There wasn't a lot of moving of the ball. It was just a hard-fought, ground-out match, and it was 4-0, and it was wind chill factor of minus something. It was crazy. It was actually went down as a colder game than that, because it was talked about that West Tigers Raiders game a couple of years beforehand. But I think Mark McClendon ended up coming off in first grade with mild hypothermia. It was one of those games that was just ridiculously cold, freezing. I couldn't feel your fingertips, sort of thing.
Wow.
But that was a benefit for us at Canberra. No team liked travelling to Canberra to play. It was always more of a mental thing, I guess, for them. I've got to go to Canberra and play in the cold, because it was only 2 hours from Sydney, but just a little bit inland. When that breeze come down off the mountains, off the ski fields there, it would just be freezing cold. But nothing during the season, nothing a good beanie and a big jacket couldn't fix. It was Is there? I've heard some stories along the way, and I think this might apply more to the 90s teams than your era. But were there tricks played on the visiting teams where they decreased the temperature in the change rooms and stuff like that to try and get them colder before they got on the field? Yeah, possibly. I mean, that might have happened back out at Seaford Oval, maybe. NBN, where they used to have the home ground, but. When at Canberra Stadium, it was a fairly new facility, and then possibly, I mean, they had air conditioning and heaters in there, so it could have been some antics that they played, but I can't recall anything. That it might be just rumours. I don't know. But, yeah, could have been. I don't know either. I remember hearing that from someone along the way. Mad Monday, was Mad Monday a thing back in your time? And is there any stories you could share that you can air publicly? Yeah, look, mate. Mad Monday. So if you played, let's say you played a grand final or the last game, it would generally be on a Saturday, or a Sunday. But for me, I was one of those guys that I didn't mind a beer, but I couldn't back up. On a Monday, I'd be absolutely toast on a Monday. So it'd take me, a while to get into it. But I guess the one Mad Monday that sticks in mind was when we did win that 2003 grand final against Penrith.
Yep.
And I was rooming with Phil Graham and Marshall Chalk at the time, and another guy, Jace Van Dyke, just at Bruce there. And my house got relabeled as Club House. It was on House Place. It was Club House. So it was the go-to sort of joint, after a game. If we get back from Sydney on a bus, we'd sort of go there for a few drinks and then hit town. But anyway, we won the grand final against Penrith, I think, on the Saturday night. It could have been the Sunday. Anyway, Monday was meet around at Jared and Phil's house, and everyone got dressed up and so forth. And and there was a lot of drinking and so forth. But when we were very well behaved, I mean, at the end of the day, we had neighbours. It was just like a unit complex. But I got a call from Jason Matthew on the Wednesday. So by that stage, I'd already gone back to work and doing my thing. But there was guys there that were still drinking. So we had a call from the neighbour next door. It was a Scottish guy, and he used to play his bandpipes a fair bit, and we actually used to like it. So he obviously let it go for a couple of days, but he rang the club, and I got a call from Jason Matthew, who's the football manager, who's still the football manager now.
Yep.
And he called me on the mobile, and I was actually at work. He goes, just had a call from the neighbour, and he was, really gave us congratulations for the boys winning the reserve grade grand final. But I mean, it's day 4, and the guys are still drinking on the balcony. One guy's got no clothes on, and it was just like. So anyway, I went round to the club and grabbed the ute with Jason Matthew, shot around, and there's a pile of cans and pizza boxes and that on our balcony. So we cleared all that away and just sort of moved everyone on, and I went inside, and because I was actually staying at Rachel and we just sort of started seeing each other. So I'd stayed at her house for a couple of nights and just sort of let them be. But there was blue cruiser stains all over my carpet. I had to get like 3 bond cleans in before to get my bond money back after that. But apart from that, it was just basically a neighbour just going, guys, awesome, you won the grand final, but look, it's day 4. Like, how can you possibly still be drinking?
Yeah, right.
But other than that, a lot of guys used to love getting dressed up. One guy in particular, Ryan O'Hara. I don't know if you remember Ryan O'Hara. He played with the Raiders, but he thought that Mad Monday was bigger than Christmas. He used to absolutely just live for it. And it was just a bit of fun, I guess. I mean, there has been some Mad Mondays, I guess, over the last few years, and now that social media is more prominent and media, sort of always want to get a story. It's sort of the spice has been taken off the Mad Mondays, I guess. Some of the antics, but at the end of the day, most of it's just all good fun, and it's just a group of blokes that just want to sort of unwind, I guess, and let their hair down a little bit after a tough season. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, cool. That's cool. One other question I wanted to ask you, and I didn't prelude to this, was when you retired. And I hear this story a lot from players, because you play every weekend for 26 rounds or whatever it is. Obviously, you're structured in the way you train. You know where to be. You know what to do. And then retirement comes along, and there's that element of feeling lost. Did you experience that, or were you settled in your decision when it happened, and then you obviously had a career to move on to afterwards? So there wasn't that element of what do I do now, or the structure was taken away.
I suppose I knew early on, like I mentioned earlier, regarding where I sort of sat with rugby league. So I was fortunate enough to play NRL, which was amazing, and I knew though that it was not going to provide, for my family long term, because I was, I probably over my career of 7 years at the Raiders, I probably earned less than 80 grand over that time. But it was more the fact that I was just given that opportunity, and I was rubbing shoulders with A graders and so forth. So I got a job, like I mentioned before, for one of the sponsors that I was selling photocopiers to the government. So I got an unbelievable opportunity to walk into a job where I was given, I think it was a 40k retainer, a car allowance, which was about 12 grand a year, plus uncapped commission. So in my first 12 months of being there, although I was the world's worst salesman, I just learned. I learned the role, and I earned 100k in my first year. So by the time I finished playing, I was getting closer to that 200k per annum as a job. So for me, transitioning to life after football, I would sort of had the best of both worlds. I was able to play the game at a reasonably high level, but at the same time start a career in sales and sort of move on from that. And that's where I sort of got onto starting my own businesses. But yeah, there's a lot of players that do suffer, Paul, and I still see it now. And I guess the clubs, and not just in rugby league, sporting in general,
Yes,
are providing a lot more pathways for players, and just, there's apprenticeships. And I suppose where I sort of look back on and think where I made a good decision is that I managed to leverage off some of those sponsors, and without taking them for granted, I was given an opportunity by them. There was no promises. And there's a couple of times there, especially in the early days in my sales role, where I think head office in Sydney wanted to pull the pin and get rid of me. But my boss at the time, Nanette Back, who was amazing, she was like a second mother to me, actually. She stuck with me and really gave me the backing, and thankfully it sort of pulled through for me. But there's a lot of players that do put all their eggs in one basket, and I guess just want to be rugby league players. They don't think about the life after football. And let's face it, if you play till you're 30, and you've got potentially another 50 years if you want to live to 80, 60 years if you live to 90, you've got that, which is 3 times, if you get to 30, there's another, 30 years. 60 years if you get to 90. My maths is terrible, but what I'm trying to say is that you've got a long, long time to go. Long time to go. So you really need to establish some form of interest outside of the game. And even with that, I left school at quite an early age. I didn't have a lot of certificates, or I didn't study, but I had a lot of experience, I guess, even before I got to Canberra with, different roles. So I had different roles in different industries. So, but looking at some players and that lost feeling, there's a lot of mental health that sets in.
Yes.
And, a lot of players that were on that sort of, I guess, 2, 3, 4% of, you think looking sort of 500K plus, come back down to having to get a day job where they might be on 80 grand, 100 grand. How do they adapt to that? How do they go from getting 500K per annum, unless they've invested it well, unless they've had good advice, and hopefully a lot of them do. But if you don't, then you could be, in for a rude shock.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. I guess particularly today with, like you said, social media, so much more TV exposure, the higher profile, higher paid players must feel so much pressure to perform each and every week. And if they don't, it can really impact your headspace, I'm assuming. Back then, obviously, there wasn't $1 million player there was today, but there was still, I think Terry Campese signed 5 years for $500,000 a year or something along those lines. So there's still a lot of money. But then there's the expectation that you need to obviously perform each and every week.
Yeah, that's right. I think the salary cap back when I was playing for the whole top 25 might have been about 4 million. I think it's up to 10 million now. It usually creeps up by about 500K every year. So, and talking about Terry Campese, he's one of those great examples of what he's done all through his career. He had the Terry Foundation, Terry Campese Foundation, where he raises a lot of money for charities. So there's guys like that obviously have had good people around him that have sort of said, hey, look, you need to sort of prepare for later on. And I think it's becoming more and more, there's a more and more focus on it. But certainly, and look for fringe players too. So even guys that, I sort of call myself a fringe player, but I was more of a reserve grade player, to be honest. But the guys that are sort of in and out of first grade, they're in the top 25 or the top 30. And they might be on 120 grand a year, which, it's not a bad money, but then, at the end of the day, once they finish their career, they haven't really made a hell of a lot of money over their course of that time. And then
that's right.
Your rugby league career is very short. How many go into media? You might have, your Cameron Smiths, your Jonathan Thurstons, or, Braithen Astor, they'll land a Fox deal or a Channel 9 deal. And then, if you go right back to like Fatty Borden and those guys, like a lot of them are starting to fade out now because the junior or the people today, the younger players, that they don't even know who Fatty Borden is or those others. So you wonder how long will that last? How long will, I'm looking at the panel now, there's probably guys like Braithen Astor and Thurston that will probably be around for a long, long time. But it's you know, when you're playing, you just don't think of that stuff. You know, all you're thinking about is just getting out there, playing footy, and you're not thinking of down the track. It's a bit like, I guess, people that are in a normal job, you know, who thinks about retirement? When you start thinking about retirement and getting your pension, you know, I know now I'm 44, coming up 45. It's certainly something that I'm thinking about, you know.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. When you're a player and you just, you know, playing the game that you love, whether it be rugby league or any sport, I don't think it's always front of mind, is it?
No, it wouldn't be. No, good point. All right, let's shift and start to wind things up, so I don't take up much more of your time. But obviously, you're still involved in rugby league. You're coaching the Kiwana Dolphins. Are you first grade coach, or are you just across all three grades?
No, so coaching was something that never really appealed to me. I never really thought too much about it. But when we moved up the sunny coast, Rachel enrolled my youngest son, Billy, at the time. He was 6. Went down to the Kiwana shopping world and enrolled Billy. And little did I know, that told the guys down there that, you know, I'd be interested in coaching. So I've rocked up to the first session down at Kiwana, Nicklin Way there. And Billy's name got called out. Yeah, Billy Lawrence, under 7 Maroons. And then, Jared Lawrence, coach. So I was given football by Darren Fraser at the time, who was the president. And here I had, you know, 12 kids running around like headless chooks. You know, how the hell am I going to do this? But best thing I could have ever done, or Rachel could have done for me, because I'm a bit of a workaholic. And if I didn't have that time away from businesses, I would probably just be working. Right. So I just thoroughly enjoyed it. I've coached the under 7s right up until they're under 18s now. So although players have come and gone, and I'm into my second year of 18, so Billy, my eldest son, is after this year he'll go into seniors. But yeah, absolutely love it, and it's a way of me giving back, because although I didn't earn millions of dollars playing the game, I feel that I got much more than that. The money side of it, I got. I was able to, all the pathways that I ended up taking through rugby league were through connections. Through business, were connections through the game. You know, so I left school didn't even get high school certificate, and then managed to get into some roles through people I met through the game. You know, and that's where they're the young people now. It says, if you've got if someone asks you from the club to go and mix with the sponsors, or you're asked to go and visit a school and do something like that, do it. Don't look at it as a chore and something that, oh God, do I have to go and do that? Because you don't know who you're going to meet. You don't know who's going to be at that meeting. You don't know who's going to be at that function, because it could be someone that loves the game of rugby league, wants to talk about it, and goes, hey, what do you think about this after you finish playing? Would you be interested in this sales role? You know, would you be interested in doing this? And I think that's what the players need to look at and try and leverage with that. Because that's, everything that I have got in my life right now. Even Rachel, I met Rachel down in Canberra. So everything I have now, I owe to the game of rugby. Yeah, right. Absolutely. I will, although coaching, people ask me, are you interested in doing A grade, or interested in getting involved with an NRL club? No, I'm not. I love the grassroots. Sure. I love helping the kids, and I'll always give back in some way, shape or form. While we sponsor the club, through giving a bit of money here and there to help kids get playing equipment, jerseys and so forth. So and that won't stop.
Unreal, mate. Unreal. That's fantastic. And just quickly talk about, obviously, one of your main businesses being Wow Wipes. Just give it a quick plug. You're obviously in gyms all across Australia, I'm assuming. Yeah.
So when we left Canberra, we got into the fitness industry. So fitness was always something I enjoyed, but I was never a PT like yourself. I'd never done the courses and so forth. We purchased the Anytime Fitness franchise. So we had Anytime Fitness Caboolture in Curramundi, and at the time, as a franchise group, you'd be given, a list of products that you'd buy, and we were paying ridiculous amounts for these wipes. And I sort of thought to myself, maybe there's some, other options out there. So long story short, I became a distributor. My business partner, who's still my business partner today, Rob, and I become a distributor of a product from the US. And then we started out at his garage in Mount Gravatt back in 2010, I think it was. So we're into our 11th or 12th year in business now. So it started as a garage business and sort of grew from there. Now we've got locations in all major cities. So we warehouse all our goods, and got an online store and supply gyms, supermarkets, offices, kindergartens and so forth. So it's been our full-time gig. Work from home here. This is my office at home, but visit our warehouses every now and then. So it's been a great business, been a real eye opener. Certainly had its challenges, especially recently with the COVID and being able to source product and so forth. But yeah, it's great.
Unreal, mate. Unreal. Well, we'll wind it up, mate. Thank you so much for your time. I could chat about the Raiders forever, honestly.
I feel that maybe, there's probably more that we could talk about, but we'll have to catch up at some stage. There's so much there and so many memories, and I'm just so grateful to be able to sort of sit back and go, wow, played at Canberra, rubbed my shoulders with like Ruben Wiki.
Yeah.
Kenny Nagus,
Kenny Nagus was
another one.
How good.
Yeah, Kenny Nagus, he was still there then, yeah. So, it's pretty cool. And the big thing for me is just giving back to the game and because I got so much out of it.
What do your kids think about you being a Raider back then and obviously playing with some of those players? Are they cool or they don't care or what's
I don't really care too much about it. No, Jed, he's got a couple of photos up there. So I've coached Jed a couple of times. He's more of a basketballer now, my youngest boy. He's sort of out of love of league, which is completely fine with me. But he's got a couple of photos up there. But that is, comes up in conversation every now and then.
Yeah, okay.
When obviously the grand final in 2003 was a big memory for me, but I played in a semi-final in 2004 against the Roosters, and Billy was born that week. So it was an awesome week because it was Ruben Wiki's last game in a Raiders jersey.
Yep.
We ended up losing by a fair bit, but it was 1 versus 8, and it was Freddie Fittler's last game.
Oh, I remember that game. That was back in the old McIntyre system. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, so 1 played 8.
Yeah.
So I started that game because who was it? Suspended. Simon Walford got suspended. So it was my first run-out game, and it was the last game I played in first grade. So I retired a little bit after that. But yeah, you had Luke Ricketson, Fitzgibbon, Craig Wing, Adrian Morley.
Yeah, wow.
It was a star-studded side. So but Ruben Wiki's last game, he pretty much played with a broken foot.
Yeah, right.
That's how tough he is. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that. I heard he's just a machine. Was a machine. Yeah, still is. So just to finish, mate, I ask everyone this question, and that's who you'd invite to dinner. So sort of a bit of a take on your personality. So who would you have over for a meal? Could be alive or dead, male, female, fictional, non-fictional. Someone that you'd like to have a chat with, and just a good feed.
Mate, I actually struggle with this question because I'm not someone that's really star-studded. Like I've got people that I look up to and so forth, but I don't really have anyone like who's a celebrity or so forth. And I don't know, that might sound a bit weird, but to be brutally honest, there's no one out there. But I've got before I left New Zealand, when I grew up, there was a bunch of kids that went off the rails a little bit. And there's one guy that spent a long, long time in prison for various things, who was pretty much my best mate. And I suppose with celebrities and with people that famous, you can always go on Google and find a lot about them and find out, what they like and so forth, and what you might want to learn off them. But you can pretty much go on Google and find that. Anyway, with this guy, and I won't say his name, but I've never been able to sit down with him and have a chat with him about what his life's been like for the last 20 years. So. I would love to catch up with him for dinner one day, maybe when he's out, so see, what his life's been like, which I guess, has been pretty tough. So, mate, I'm just being honest.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate that.
I'd sit down with him and have a yarn and have a good catch up. So.
Unreal, mate. Unreal. Well, mate, thank you once again. It's been really, from a fan, it's been cool, but also from a health and fitness perspective, it's really good to get insight into how professionals in rugby league trained, looked after themselves back in those days. And obviously you can clearly see the change and the shift in evolution of and the involvement of science into what it is today, and how much more I guess they look over the stats and the science and the GPS and the tracking and the loads, and it's incredible to compare to what it is back then, when, like you said, you just got to suck it up and do it. Whereas now, if they look like they're getting burnt out, or if they're having a bad day, they generally get an opportunity to rest or recover, or their week shifts and so forth. So yeah, it was really interesting.
And I think the stats don't lie, do they? So
No.
I guess now you could probably go, really, really deep into the statistics of it too. And I
Yeah.
guess that's why they have the bean counters up there now that do all that, and it's all probably programmed, and there's some form of app that they just throw all the data into. But yeah, it'd be interesting going back and having that, I suppose, insight to yourself, I guess, and it must be good as a player now to have that.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah, knowing what your strengths and your weaknesses are and what you need to work on. So
yeah, definitely. Well, thanks once again, mate. I really appreciate your time today.
No worries, mate. All the best, and well done with your podcast. It looks like you're doing really well with it. So thanks for having me on, mate. I really appreciate it. Hopefully, I gave you a little bit of insight to what used to happen. It was a long time ago, but
yep.
There's a few stories here for you. So.
Awesome, mate. Thank you so much.